welcome to the 2014 February 4th session of the work session of the school committee where we're talking about the budget tonight. I apologize for our late start. We were in executive session a little longer than we expected to be. So with that, we will get started, and if all would rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lorraine, if you could please call the roll.
Linda Avanzado.
Here.
John Biscardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi.
Here.
Cheryl Clarkin.
Here.
Robert Jones.
Here.
William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Julia Howell.
Here.
Chelsea Campbell.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Actually, that rolls us straight into citizens' comments. So I believe there's some citizens here to talk tonight. Just feel free to state your name and where you're from, and then you may begin.
Hi, my name's Gianna Benavides. I'm from Saunderstown, and I'm currently enrolled in Portuguese too, so I'm concerned about the Portuguese classes being cut. Portuguese is part of my heritage, and I know a lot of people who are also Portuguese in Rhode Island. I know business classes have been advertising Portuguese because the international business is moving into Brazil. It's predicted in 2020. Also, I know there's concern about enrollment in Portuguese dropping as you go to like Portuguese 3 or Portuguese 4. But recently, Ms. Schiavone set up a partnership with Rhode Island College, and they're offering 4 college credits if you take that class for $250. So I know a lot of students are currently interested in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gia.
Is there anyone else? Great. We're going to move on to the superintendent's report.
I think I'm all set for tonight. Thank you.
Right. So that brings us into routine items. Lorraine, do we have any? Actually, first I need a motion from the committee to seal the executive session minutes from tonight's meeting, February 4th, 2014. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor of sealing the minutes from tonight's executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Are there any abstentions?
Yes.
Thank you. Linda, did you abstain?
Yeah, I wasn't there.
No,
No, I
I didn't
said
abstain.
Linda.
I don't think I have to abstain from sealing. I have to abstain from approving, but do I need to abstain from sealing them?
Yes, no.
Did you say you voted for
Aye.
yes? Okay, got it. All right, no problem.
My vote was in the affirmative.
You're right.
Right, you're correct. I'm sorry about that. Okay, Lorraine, disclosure of executive session votes.
All members were present at tonight's executive session except Bill Mudge and Linda Avanzado. Motion by Cheryl Clarkin to accept the superintendent's recommendation to deny a grievance, seconded by John Biscardin, and the vote was that the motion passed 4-0 with Mr. Cerisi abstaining. Thank you.
All right, that brings us to unfinished business. The first thing on our agenda there are special education updates, and I'm not sure who is going to start this with Dr. Ajay or Mr. Cerisi.
I'll stop if that's okay.
Sure.
Really not quite sure where I want to start, and I'll try to make this as streamlined as possible and as understandable as possible for those who may not know the history of what has transpired in the district over the past several months. And if I misspeak or if I'm missing anything, I encourage the superintendent or my colleagues to certainly chime in, because it certainly has been very busy. As some of you may know, going back several months ago, there was a vote of no confidence in our special education leadership in Dr. Pizzullo and Kathy Perry by some of the staff at the high school, and I believe some of the staff at a couple of the elementary schools as well. I think, as Dr. Rogier has said many times, RIDE did a compliance audit of the district as far as programs and services. There were several areas where the district was not in compliance, and Dr. Rogier, Dr. Pizzullo, and Kathy Perry have aggressively worked with the school committee, the rest of the administration, and the staff out at the schools to address those areas of non-compliance. And they really have tackled quite a bit, to say the least. These are areas where the district was not in compliance, very, very basic areas, that the district, quite honestly and quite frankly, should have been in compliance with a long time ago. So, I applaud Dr. Pizzullo and her team for taking this challenge on. I want to be very careful and not to paint all of the teachers with the same brush, because that is certainly not the case. And I want to make that clear. That is not the case. For the most part, the staff out at the schools has really taken to the challenge put before them by RIDE and by the administration to fall into compliance in these areas. Nonetheless, we have had several staff members who have not, who would like to continue to do things the way that they've always done them, for whatever reason they see justifiable. These changes that we're implementing are not optional; they're mandates. So this isn't a maybe, or it is mandatory. I can tell you as a school committee member, but more importantly as a parent of a special needs child myself who is enrolled in special education programs here in the district, I support the mandates, I support the changes that are being made. And I'm encouraged by the work that I've seen our administration do and the work that I've seen most of our teachers do. And I still think we obviously have a lot more work to be done, and we will keep at it, and I know the team will keep at it. So the discouraging part is I am very disappointed and discouraged with the leadership of the teachers union, the local teachers union. Mr. Kevin Dubois has chosen to, in the beginning, work with the administration and communicate and work on these issues where there was a difference of philosophy or a difference of opinion or maybe a little bit lack of a communication. Many meetings were held to address these concerns. And coincidentally, right after we voted and finished contract negotiations with the teachers union, Mr. Dubois took it upon himself to take it to the newspapers and really misinform a lot of teachers in the district who don't know all the facts, don't know all the information, misinform parents, and misinform the community. So as I try to streamline it as best I can and kind of lay it out historically as best I can, I will tell you that we have had, and I did not want to have this, as Dr. Rogier knows, I did not want to have this discussion publicly. We have had teachers in this district, and again, I want to be very careful not to paint all the teachers with the same brush, because this is a chosen few. We have teachers in this district whose comments have been to leadership here and also to the NEASC accreditation team that we don't want those kids in our classrooms. Those kids in our regular classrooms. We shouldn't have to have those kids in our classrooms. Again, unacceptable. That's barbaric 1950s thinking. And I can tell you that as long as I'm on this school committee, that will not be tolerated, and I would encourage any teacher who feels that way to step up to the microphone, come out to a meeting, and I promise you I will do my best to make sure you're fired ASAP. So I appreciate the patience. I appreciate the work that's been going on. I, for one, would like to make a motion of support and of confidence in Dr. Pizzullo, in Kathy Perry, and our teachers who have chosen to take on these challenges and support the work that needs to be done.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second for the discussion. Mrs. Avanzato.
That was a very good description. Covered a lot of things that I was going to say. Very disappointing. This committee was aware that these issues were being handled, but the fact that this vote was taken, and then especially that it was made public, is especially disappointing. The vote was taken 3 days into the school year, which is kind of confusing in that they didn't really give people an opportunity to address the issues. And as Mr. Cerisi said, the underlying attitude of just a couple of teachers was extremely disappointing. But there's no doubt in my mind that this vote against the leadership of special education was about resistance to complying with federal law. And we should give credit to our special education department that they came in here and finally made things right. Other districts had been in compliance for years, and we had been out of compliance. This district was at risk of fines and disciplinary action and other consequences because of this. So I think it's incumbent upon us, when two people are targeted in the newspaper the way they were and made to sound like they're not doing their jobs and they're terrible workers, that we have to set the record straight. This is not how we would have chosen to do this, but the attitude that Mr. Cerisi referred to is certainly not acceptable in this district. I think it's rare in this district, but it's not acceptable. And I think a lot of teachers went along with this vote and didn't know what was really behind this vote. Seems to me just a matter of pushing back against change when all they were trying to do, Kathy Perry and Patty, was enforce compliance with federal law. We don't have a choice about that. So I applaud the work that they've been doing. We're very lucky to have them, and we're in a much better position and less risk with them at the helm.
Are there further comments? Mr. Biscardi.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I just want to echo my support for Dr. Pizzullo and her staff. They have a very difficult and unenviable job. They're in a no-win situation pretty much every day. Every day they wake up and put their 2 feet on the floor and decide to come to work. They're going to piss somebody off. That's just it. And it's a shame that Kevin Dubois, in an effort to make his bones as a new union leadership with his rank and file, chose to throw colleagues under the bus to do it.
I just wanted to add one last thing. Like I said, very important not to paint everyone with the same brush, and some of the concerns that were initially brought forward as a result of this by the teachers were very understandable, very credible concerns, and I think the administration has done and continues to do their best to address those and keep the lines of communication open and work together. And, there's things that have been corrected, and there's things that we will continue to work on to correct. So, again, I think, I'm not quite sure what this individual was looking to achieve with his vote and his press relief. I think Mr. Biscardi actually hit it on the head exactly what he was looking to achieve. But certainly no way for us, all of us, to work together and get these things done that need to get done for the children. It's not for us, for the adults. It's for what's in the children, the best interest of these kids. So, thank you.
If there's nobody else, then I'll chime in. It's always difficult when to do any sort of change. And when we received notification from the Department of Education last year that we needed to change what we were doing with our special education, in that we needed to make sure that every student here in the district was educated with highly qualified teachers. It's not that you have one set of students who are being educated with a different teacher, but everyone has to be with a highly qualified teacher. And so, you know, it would be a disservice for us not to be pushing for that and to be making sure that every child has an equitable opportunity to be educated. So that was the path that we got from the Department of Education. That was the path that our administration said, we are taking that. We are going to follow what needs to be done. So the guidance that our teachers have received from Dr. Pizzullo and Kathy Perry are what we ethically have to do for every student within the district. And to do so otherwise, and then to say that you have no confidence in basically this ethical issue of making sure that our special education students get the same sort of education that everybody else is, I just don't understand that. And so I wholly support this vote here today, in that I think they are doing the job that they were hired to do to make sure that our education is the same for our neediest students as well as our highest achieving students. So if there's no further comments, why don't we take a roll call vote?
Linda Avanzado.
Yes.
John Biscardin.
Yes.
Larry Cerisi.
Yes.
Cheryl Clarkin.
Yes.
Robert Jones.
Yes.
William Mudge.
I think I'm going to abstain.
Kimberly Page.
And
Yes.
I'd like to
Thank you.
explain the reason.
Yes, Mr. Mudge, if you would like to explain your reason, go ahead.
This is kind of a he said, she said, and I think a world of Patty, okay, but, you know, we had problems in the past. We thought that, you know, that we were in good shape, and then, you know, apparently we weren't. But nonetheless, there's a lot to do, and a lot more to do, I believe. And I certainly don't know all the issues, and I haven't spoken to anybody with the school department, so I don't know what their position is, and just to arbitrarily go out and say, hey, these people, there's a core of bad people in the school district. I think we need to do a little more work to understand that. Now, I also would like to get some other people in here and discuss this with, which I haven't, is the CLAC committee. You know, they were here last week with some issues with apparently representation, you know, and efforts, and they're recognized by state law, okay, to provide inputs into this program, and I would seek their input and follow their input as well as part of this, but I don't even want to go down this whole path because I think there's a lot more that needs to be looked at. So I'm staying neutral, and I'm staying out of it.
All right. That brings us into our next agenda item,
Applaud neutrality.
which is discussion of the superintendent's budget.
I'm sorry, before we move off that agenda topic, I just want to make mention to one thing, because I know we've received some emails and questions regarding the Davisville Academy, which we are scheduled to open in late August 2014. So I know there's a lot of questions in the community, and Dr. Roger has discussed it with the committee, and soon basically putting together or waiting for additional information at this time and some additional figures, if I understand correctly, and we will soon be having a public discussion and presentation on where we stand on Davisville Academy. So I just wanted to make sure that the community was aware of that.
Right, and we'll make sure we have that time out. That will be after our budget discussions. So our budget discussions will need to end by February 25th so that we can have that document over to the town by March 3rd. So it'll be after that point that we will have the discussion on the Davisville Academy. All right, so that brings us to I don't want to say where we left off, but last time we had the presentation of the budget, and I am going to turn this over to Dr. Auger, but I will remind the committee that we went through the document that you were all given, and so we weren't going to be going through that again. Last time we didn't have enough time to take a lot of questions, so I anticipate tonight will be a time where we do have more questions, and we'll proceed from there. So I am going to turn this now over to Dr. Auger and Mary King, and then we'll open up for more questions from the committee.
Thank you. I kind of see things the same way. I did a lot of talking last time to kind of get you familiar with the budget and some of the moves that I had proposed to make. My proposals are still on the table, and I've had some discussions with some of you over the week and in previous weeks about things that you would like to see and points that you would like me to provide some further maybe information or points just to focus. So I'm prepared for that tonight. If people have further questions or concerns about areas, I ask that you bring them forward and we can discuss. I can give you the feedback that I would have, and in some cases I may need a little time to go back and work with, say, a principal on something that you would like me to look more closely at and come back a week from now with some kind of a proposal on how to address the concern that you may have if I'm not able to do so tonight.
Mr. Cerisi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things that I think I mentioned at our last budget meeting. If not, I've mentioned them in discussion with Dr. Auger and Mrs. King. As far as the proposed staffing reductions, additions, that one-page sheet that we have in front of us, as I've said many times, the clerk positions, the office clerk positions, I can support, and this covers the proposed additions as well as the current clerk's positions in existence. I have and can support those clerk positions running 2 weeks after school ends, as to give the clerks and the office staff an opportunity to pretty much wrap up the end of school year after all the students have gone home for the summer. And I could also support them to be there for the 2 weeks prior to the startup of school to get things up and running before the children come back to school. What I can't support any longer is that 6-week period in between. We have 10 weeks of summer. That 2 weeks after school ends, 2 weeks before school ends, begins, fine. The middle 6 weeks, I just don't see any need or justification for having clerks in the buildings. I think there is a savings that can be achieved there. When you add up all the clerk positions as well as these proposed clerk positions, I know there may be contractual restrictions why we may not be able to address that right now for the existing current clerk's positions. But I don't think there is any contractual restrictions on why these new positions, newly created positions that we may or may not approve. In the posting, they should stipulate that they will not run job posting, that they will not run during those 6 weeks of the summer. That's something that I would ask that Mrs. King and our attorney, Mary Ann Carroll, if they could take a little time and research that and see what viable options the committee may or may not have in that area. As far as the dollar amount, as far as contractual, I'm sure we're going to hear that we not from our folks, but I'm sure we're going to hear that we can't do that, and I would challenge that we can't do that. I believe we can do that, and I certainly believe we can do it with the positions that have not yet been created. So, as Mrs. King reminds us so often, and I firmly agree with her, 87% of our budget is staff and benefits. So when you need to save large dollars, we're not going to do it with pens and pencils. One other area on that sheet that I questioned was the teacher assistant program at, it says for special education at Stony Lane. Not sure exactly which programs we may or may not have at Stony Lane come September as far as special education concerns goes. This position doesn't appear to be assigned to a classroom or a one-to-one for a student, so I kind of, again, would like a little bit further detail and justification of the need of the position.
We will definitely provide that for you.
All right, is there someone else? Mr. Mudge, do you have your hand up?
Let me do a little, before we get into any details, a little housekeeping work here. About the budget process. Last year, we didn't follow the process as far as I'm concerned, and I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to do this. What we've talked about here in this process is strictly the funding for general fund program. We haven't talked about capital expenditures, we haven't talked about enterprise funds, and we haven't talked about grant funding. Although I noticed in the budget process here that we have said, well, this program is going to be grant funded and so forth. I believe we have an obligation to forward these 4 areas for approval for the town council, for their approval, including the grants, which we have not been doing. The grant funds have been drying up for the last 3 years, no question about that. And we should have more oversight early on what we're going to do with our grant funding and how we're going to apply the grant funding. And we should be part of that process. We haven't been part of that process. Not that I'm finding any fault at this time, but I think we have a responsibility to do that up front. I know it's done in other school districts. The enterprise fund, the same thing, cafeteria and all other enterprise funds that we have on the books. That should be part of our budget submission to the council. And again, as I say, the capital investment plan, we should be identifying. It's not just merely enough to send a CIP program with X amount of dollars into something. We have to be more specific. We have a need and put it in our budget, and if the town council doesn't feel as if they want to fund this, then let them take it out. Now, in respect to that, I did ask some questions before regarding the overall budget because I wanted to get some information concerning pluses and minuses.
Mr. Mudge, did you want somebody to respond to the first part of your before you jump into something else?
Sure.
Mr. Streisey.
Mrs. King, if you could so humor me, please. I'm going to ask some redundant questions that I already know the answers to, and I know my other 5 colleagues at the table know the answers to, because this is an annual conversation that we have for Mr. Mudge.
Thank you.
The budget book that you presented us with, the preliminary budget, I'm looking at it, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Section 5, is that not the capital improvement program budget?
It is,
CIP?
yeah.
And we do have prioritized in there what we would like to do in year 2014, 2015, 2016?
Yes, as that was presented by Dr. Ajay and I, yep.
And we also have the enterprise accounts in here, right? Cafeteria accounts.
Page 19, and in that first tab, page 19, page 23 or 24, so yes, it's all in there.
We also have, like, when a position is grant funded rather than funded out of our general fund, it's identified as so in the budget that it's being funded out of a grant funding and not the general budget.
Page 19, yeah.
Right. And this whole package, once we basically, the committee votes on a final budget to send to the council, all that information will be in the package that goes to the town council, right? The CIP?
Right.
What's grant funded, what's general funded?
And the town has the CIP right now. The process of how that works is the CIP goes to asset management, and they work that with the town. And I believe last year, in this same exact discussion, what the school committee approved as a budget.
We've had the same exact discussion for the last 10 years. So I just wanted to make sure that I was on the same planet here and that I understood this correctly. So my questions are redundant, and I apologize for that, but again, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the information that we have in front of us. We all may not be in agreement with the information, but we certainly need to agree and recognize that we do have the information in front of us.
May I follow up with comment, please? Thank you.
Are you finished, Mr.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mudge.
Well, I think it's clear that Mr. Cerisi doesn't really know the process of approving the school budget, okay? We are required to vote on each of these areas. When we send our budget over, we only send and approve the general fund budget. We don't approve the grant budget. We don't approve the enterprise fund. A lot of smirks over there, and we don't approve the grants, okay, of the CIP. Somebody's going to pick them out of the hat? All we have to do, Mr. Cerisi, is look at the town charter and follow the town charter. All of these have got to be appropriated by the town council. And by the way, okay, because Mrs. Page said to Mrs. Dolan last year, quote, the school committee approved these various programs last year, the enterprise fund, the grant fund, and our capital requirements. The town council, in fact, approved a level of funding for each one of these categories, which we need to adhere to. It is a requirement that we provide this to the town council. Thank you. And vote on it.
Mrs. Amadado, did I see your hand up earlier?
Yes, I have a question, and I probably have asked this question the last 3 years, maybe more. But we've been over this at least 10 times in the past 10 years, and my question is, in the budget book, we have the grant funds listed. We have the enterprise funds listed. When we vote, and I think we asked Mary Ann Carroll this last year, when we vote on the bottom line of the budget, we're voting on all of those. Is that correct?
And that's what you did,
That is incorrect.
58.7. No, if you go back
Okay,
to the
well,
meeting,
excuse
you voted
me.
$58,729,000. Michael Embry
Right, 58
appropriated
million.
all of those
58,
amounts.
you're absolutely right, 58, but that doesn't include grant funding. That doesn't include the enterprise fund. That doesn't include any capital funds. That's what I'm saying. Don't we understand that?
Could we move on to more specific questions on Dr. Roget's budget? I believe we're not going to come to a 7-member consensus.
Well,
on
why don't
this
we have
issue.
somebody, why did the town council approve these for the first time 2 years ago, by the way? And we can't spend in excess on either of these. For example, grants, we can't spend in excess. Our enterprise fund, and this is why for so many years we spent over $500,000, $700,000 on grant funds because we just kept letting it roll over.
Okay, I'm going to call on Mr. Cerisi, and then I saw Mrs. Albanzar.
I would concur with Mrs. Page. I would like to move on to the specific budget itself. This is
Which budget?
obviously a topic that we disagree on. Mr. Mudge,
Which budget?
every year for the last 10 years, you have said that the administration's wrong, the school committee's wrong, the town council's wrong, the town manager's wrong. You file a complaint with RIDE, you file a complaint with the Auditor General, you file a complaint with the Attorney General. They have all disagreed with you.
What don't you agree with the town charter?
Sorry.
It says the town council must appropriate all our funding.
Thank you, Bill.
All right.
Have
so,
a good night.
Madam
Thank
Chair,
you,
Mrs.
Mr.
Albanzar,
Cerisi.
you had your hand up. Did you
I
have
just
something else?
wish people would apply their considerable experience and intellect to areas of the budget that we might, and I know Mr. Mudge and the Budget Subcommittee will have something to say on those matters. I have a few quick opening comments or questions relating to the language section that we're discussing. Relating to the language session that we have been discussing, I think it was at the last meeting or the meeting before when I had mentioned German being very low in numbers of students. The proposal that we have in front of us is to cut the Portuguese section. Having looked at the numbers of students, I personally feel, there's almost double the numbers in the Portuguese classes, and I think that we need to focus on how many students are being serviced. I do understand about the continuum with the engineering program at URI and their interest in our German program, but we're not here for that reason. We're here for North Kingstown students, and we have quite a few of those in the Portuguese sections, more so than the German. So I had a concern around that, and just in general, wanting to drill down a little bit on some of these sections that only have 14, 15 kids. We're going to have to make some cuts in those areas, and that will obviously be high impact because, as Mr. Cerisi said earlier, that's the largest part of our budget.
Mr. Cerisi, I see your hand up. Can I
One
give
quick
Dr.
thing.
Ajay? Oh,
I just actually
I'm almost done.
Go ahead, I'm
I was
sorry.
just going to agree with your earlier point about clerks, especially the new hires. I don't see any reason why we would continue the hires and using the clerks over the summer when really there's not a lot for them to be doing. So I think that's something I concur with as well.
Actually, if I could just ask a quick question, Dr. Roger may be able to incorporate it in his response because it is on the same topic as the German and Portuguese. I'm not fully understanding, and it's my own fault, I haven't really kept myself up to speed on where exactly we left off with URI and our German program. Are we receiving any funding from them to assist in our implementation of the German program? So that's one question I had, and one comment is going back to what Mrs. Avizano said, as far as those clerks' position, I would not even entertain supporting adding any additional clerk positions if they are going to include that 6-week period during the summertime. So, thank you.
To address the issue of the foreign languages, as I made, as the point I made last week was my proposal to go with Portuguese instead of German was in order to have a variety that I found was evident with German, French, and Spanish, more so than including Portuguese and Spanish as two options. As you know, my understanding of foreign language options is that those are the two languages that are closer to one another than before, than the others with, say, Spanish, which is our #1 elective. It is our #1 foreign language elective to some degree because it is something that we teach at the middle school level, where we don't teach any of the other foreign languages at the middle school level. So a number of students get a leg up on Spanish in 8th grade and decide to move right to, say, Spanish 2 in 9th grade to continue moving with it. My feeling is that, to answer your question, Mrs. Cerisi, we do not receive any particular funding of any kind from URI. They do appreciate the fact that we have German. Right now, we are the only school in the state, I believe, that teaches German. And it does dovetail nicely for them. They've had students from NK go to their program in international engineering in the German, but they also have strands in other languages as well, and I believe Portuguese is actually one of them. I believe all of the languages that we have are one of them. I've had conversations with them. They obviously, when I talk to their foreign language people, love the fact that North Kingstown has 4 foreign languages. And last year, when I was talking about the possibility of reducing, they were pretty upset with me. And I had to remind them that we have more than anyone in the state right now. You know, it's not a personal thing for me. It's not a cultural thing for me. I'm trying to keep separate from all of that. I'm trying to keep opportunities for our students in various languages, language strands. A number of our students, by the way, take more than one. They will use, they'll go deep in one language, and then because of the major that they're looking to explore in college, maybe as a senior they might take the first level of something completely different, like French, and they're taking French to go the distance, and then they'll take German just to get some exposure to it because they know they're going to be a language student or do something more with languages down the line. So it's nice to have that variety. I believe, that, I've seen an email today about the popularity of the teacher in Portuguese. I agree. She is popular, and rightfully so. She does a great job, and she's an inspiring person but she will still be in NK teaching foreign languages and available to our students no matter what subject she teaches down the road. And she will still be available to the current students that she has all the way through their studies. I'm not looking to cut that off at any particular place. So, it's not an easy decision when something students, particularly something students love, is something that we look to eliminate. But I believe in the interest of being efficient in our foreign language offerings, that 3 is a better place to go. I think you're going to see the enrollment obviously move up in the other 3 if 1 is gone. And I just think it makes sense to have the French, German, and Spanish options as the ones available. That is up to the committee.
Mrs. Avanzado.
Yes, thank you. I totally understand that we are dealing with limited resources, and your preference would be and my preference would be to keep both. So we're not in that position. And I sympathize with looking at the different qualities for each course and trying to juggle it that way. And I understand what you're saying. However, for me, I can't support keeping the German class over the Portuguese class because I looked at the numbers. There's small numbers in the German class compared to the Portuguese. There's almost double the students. So that has to come into it for me. No offense, Phil, that's just my opinion.
No offense.
And I know you were kind of juggling those 2 things anyway.
I do understand
so
that.
That's where I'm coming from on that.
Okay, Mrs. Clerkin, and then Mr. Smith.
I have to concur with Mrs. Avanzado. I think we have to look at the trend of enrollments and where the interest is in the students going forward when we're thinking of cutting or eliminating a foreign language course. The other question I would raise is if we support 3 foreign languages or 4 foreign languages in our district, why would we only provide Spanish to the middle schools? If we're looking at cutting certain foreign languages, why don't we cut out Spanish in middle school?
We had French and Spanish, and I don't know how far back this goes, but I think in the long term, French and Spanish have always been 2 foreign languages that were taught in North Kingstown. German and Portuguese came on later on. And those were both sustained at the middle school. But it became a real problem for scheduling at the middle school to the point that it made it very difficult to line up just the right students with the right subject that they wanted to take for that elective. And we felt it was important to allow them a foreign language option, but allowing 2 options at the middle school, it meant you had to have 2 of the right kinds of certifications at each middle school, and then line up the middle school schedule so all of the right students who want to take one or the other could make that happen. And again, it was a matter of efficiency. It wasn't a matter of not wanting to do it. It was a matter of being able to give kids some kind of experience and do it in an efficient way that was budget conscious. And it was very difficult to do that with 2 foreign language offerings at the middle school.
But we're not required to provide a foreign language in the middle school.
No.
So maybe it's something to consider, knowing that the trend is lower enrollments and staffing is our biggest percentage of the budget, that maybe that's something that we should explore. We can't offer everything, so maybe, elimination of a foreign language is just something to look into in the middle school.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say that having a foreign language in the middle school is actually incredibly beneficial because I know that I took Spanish in 8th grade, and because I was able to take Spanish in 8th grade, in my freshman year I took Spanish too, so now I'm in AP Spanish, and it's incredibly beneficial to all the students who are able to take an AP language course their senior year, because then we can take those credits, and especially if we want to have a minor in it in college. Such as me, like if I wanted to minor in Spanish, then I'd be able to have those credits back me up and the experience. And also with the Portuguese, if Ms. Schiavone, as she had said, can go on with the EEP class, which is the RIP one, early enrollment program, then the class will have like a set, strict course, and I think that it'll bring the class to so much more potential, and more kids will enroll in it because then they can get college credits, and those college credits, such as the business classes that we have now, that we have like with RIP, they go transfer to so many colleges, and all the colleges that I even applied to will take mine that I have from the business classes. So I think if you keep Portuguese and she goes on with her EEP edition, then I think it's going to increase the amount of students who actually enroll in Portuguese as well. So I think it'll be beneficial to the course if you keep that.
Thank you very much for providing that insight and information. Do we know, with regard to, since we're talking about college credits and AP classes with these foreign languages and how they interact with other institutions, do we know if the same holds true for German and French? Do our students get credits, college credits for those as well as going down the path for Portuguese?
Tom?
Okay, so that's strictly just for Portuguese and for Spanish as well? Okay. Thank you.
I should say, I'll chime in here that I think we hear more from parents who want to start the language at a younger age, so I don't know. I would not support getting rid of it at the middle school. Okay, I've seen hands up, Mr. Streese and then Mr. Jones and Mr. Mudge.
Just a quick comment. Dr. Roger, I think just for clarity's sake, if the committee chose to eliminate Portuguese 1 or German 1 or whatever it may be, as you outlined to us at our last meeting, I think that the committee and the community need to understand that it would only be Portuguese 1 or German 1 or French 1 or Spanish 1, whatever it may be. So I guess what I'm trying to make clear to people is that if a student is in Portuguese 1 right now, next year Portuguese 2 will be available. The year after that, Portuguese 3 will be available. Portuguese 4 would be available to them.
Right.
So certainly any student who's chosen the path of German 1 or Portuguese 1 is not going to have those credits go to waste. They will continue to have the opportunity to move forward in the German or Portuguese program.
That is correct.
I saw Mr. Jones' hand up next. I guess one of the things I would say is the committee needs to decide, is it the language that is bothering you, or is it that you merely want a .2? Because maybe the conversation should not, if you really want to have a language, then you can always request from Dr. Roger that he come back to the committee with a different .2, rather than designating a different language. Picking basically that you like one language over another, or we see one is more popular among the students than the other. Would it be that you would say you want a language, or would it be that you say you would want a different .2? It's a question. It's not. So, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. I think that's a fair point, along with, if I guess when we use the word efficiency in terms of what we mean by that. So maybe I would make the suggestion, Dr. Roger, go back with the appropriate staff he feels, because if we were looking at truly efficiency by numbers, we should eliminate French. And maybe there's a discussion that needs to be had at his level to say, okay, we see a snapshot of 1 year. Is that an anomaly year, or is that a trend? I mean, the other point with German is, if I'm reading the staffing right, is that German's only a .4 FTE, right? And the teacher teaches tech readiness. So, that translates to .2 is, I think it's worth having a conversation with URI to say, we're not talking about you funding $80,000, $100,000 to keep our German program. It may be $25,000. It may be some, to say, if it's worth it for the state to have some German in the state, maybe it's worth for the state institution to to help us out a little. So, especially if it's been providing 2, 3, 4 students every year, or some number. So I would agree, Ms. Page, that maybe the point may be to go back and explore different options with regard to this, and maybe clarify what we mean by efficiency. I understand Dr. Ojay's point about the diversity of the language being a thing, but again, if we're using efficiency, I would say we should support the languages where the enrollment demand exists.
I see your point. I just want to clarify, my point that I was making about efficiency is that no matter what we do, in looking at 3 languages instead of 4, that you have a greater likelihood that those classes will run with an efficient number of students, say in the 20s, to make the class worth running in regards to budgetary reasons. And you wouldn't get to the point of having an upper-level class, even combining a level 3 and 4, and the ultimate total was 6 students. That's hard to sustain for efficiency's sake. Even though you want to do that because those students have committed to this and you want to allow them to see it through. I think that's fair, and that's not something that I'm looking to take away from anybody in making this move. So I'd be happy to continue to look at this.
Yeah, I would just worry that, by default, if we reduce the number, we'll put kids in, but if historically there's a dropout rate from going to 2 and 3, that forcing kids into level 1 of a language that doesn't pertain kids over anyways is just going to mean you'll still... So, maybe the question really is, is the one-year data we're seeing a trend data, or is it a historic pattern that kids don't retain at the higher level in certain languages versus the others? And maybe that could also guide our thing. Clearly I would love to offer 4, and I agree. And so, again, I think it's worth a conversation that the amount of money the state throws at everything else seems to me a small investment for something that I know URI touts, especially the German part of their program. They had a whole big thing. It's their second largest component of that engineering program. You think there'd be some willingness to put a little seed money into the one place where it's actually being taught. So, again, I think it's worth a conversation at whatever levels we need to engage the right people as that is an option.
Mr. Mudge, you had your hand up.
Well said on that, Bob. I was going to bring that up because my nephew, in fact, attended, it was in the German program in engineering, and spent 6 months in Germany, and that wound up working for the German subsidiary in Massachusetts. Nonetheless, I think it's a matter of choices, and we know our emphasis has also been on science and technology and so forth and so on, and I would be ashamed to not have the German program, especially because of what you just said. They've got a world-class German program that was started, and I think the professor just recently retired. But it's a very, very comprehensive program, and it's been very successful. It would be nice if we could dovetail with those folks in some manner, and if we can't teach German in our district here, then possibly we could make an offering some other way that the student could participate in German. So I don't know if there's enough opportunities, savings in other areas that would allow us to keep German, but I think from a global standpoint, from an engineering and industrial standpoint, that I think there's a lot of merit in keeping German and having our engineering students participate in that, if they do, I hope.
Mr. Busgarten.
Back to your original query, Ms. Page, about the point 2. Frankly, as far as which language it is, I don't have an axe to grind on either of them. I do lean toward the efficiency side, where most kids are enrolled. That just seems to be a typical way of looking at where you save money, where to cut and what not to cut based on savings and meeting the needs of the students. However, to Mr. Mudge and Mr. Jones's point, that if it is an integral part of URI, of engineering in general, and URI specifically, then I would think it would be worth pursuing to see if they can somehow help us out with maintaining their minor league, so to speak, for German to get the kids in the engineering program and then into URI. So I personally don't care where the .2 comes from, basically, is what I'm saying, but I would like to see a .2. And Dr. Auger, I think that would be the best way to go about it, to keep everybody happy. We don't want to cut our noses to spite our faces just to do something and then upset the apple cart with not meeting the needs of our student body. So I think that's where I would stand with that.
Well, and I bring it up because last year we had before us the German program, and it was the sort of thing that we received many emails through professors down at URI, and at the end of the discussion, this committee said, no, we wanted to make a commitment to keep that. So I bring that up because I don't want this to be where we're pitting one language against the other.
Right.
And last year, the committee said they were fully behind the German program, so I just want to remind you that if you say you switch to a different language, you're merely going to hear from a different group of students and other folks. I like the idea of asking URI, in seeing how college budgets are running thus far. While I believe that the question is a good one to ask, I don't believe that we will receive much of a response from URI, knowing how their budget has been the last few years in higher education. So I'm not discounting that, but I'm saying I don't think we'll receive a positive response. And remember, at this point in the juncture, this is merely the hoped-for budget that we would be submitting to the town council. This is if they truly gave us the 2% that we're asking for, but that translates into 3.1%? Is that what you said last week, Mrs. King?
3.35 adjusted from what's in the book based on information that Dr. Auger presented last week, although I know that that's not final, so it would be around 3.35%.
Excuse me,
Right.
point of
So-
order.
so
Could I
that's-
ask a quick question? When we use these numbers, these percentages, could we please clarify 2% of what?
It's town funding.
Yeah, because, 2% increase over our last year's budget.
Correct.
But, however, we need to make sure we say that because it needs to be in the papers that way. Last year, or it was the year before, I think, it was the number over, I guess it was the percentage on the tax rate that we were using in the newspaper, and people were assuming that was the increase over the previous year's budget. It's a 2% increase over the previous year's budget. That needs to be really clear.
That's what needs to be clear is that that's what our total budget is looking at while we are in preliminarily now. I know nothing's final, but right now where we stand, the 3.36 is the ask from the town over last year's property taxes. So what that really means is that our other revenues have gone down and things have been adjusted, expenses have been adjusted. So it's 3.36% right now over last year's town funding. That's the number that I think you're looking for.
Thank you.
Right. So the prime reason I bring that up is because this may be one of those discussions that is very nice of what we really want, but in the end, we will be looking at cutting a lot more. So that's why I bring the discussion. Are there other things on the superintendent's proposed budget that people would like to talk about? Mr. Buscard.
Yeah,
Mr. Mudge.
I apologize for going back. I'm being away for a few meetings at this time of the year was not my idea, so I'm really trying to get back up to speed as quickly as possible. I'd like to go back to the sheet, Doctor, your summary of proposed staffing reductions and additions, the draft.
Yes.
As we were talking, I did some quick numbers, and it looks like that between the elementary and middle schools, you're projecting an increase of 6 kids. The 2 middle schools was an increase of 45, and the elementary schools was a decrease in 39, and the high school decrease of 71. I realize that you can't do a whole lot necessarily with teachers, because the numbers come from, even if for example, the 71 at the high school, you divide that by 4, that's 17.75 kids per year. So I realize that doesn't, then you spread that amongst the classes, that really doesn't amount to much as far as teachers go. But I'm wondering, with that kind of reduction in kids, do we need to have as much support staff, meaning clerical? As kids get reduced, there's less paperwork, and with that alone, you're still talking about a total of all FTE changes of you want to add 3.25 people. Yet we're having a reduction of 60 some odd kids. I would think that you'd be able to do a little bit better job with the clerical end of that, bearing in mind that not only we're having a reduction of children, we're having an increase in technology that's going to hopefully, at least ideally, increase the turnaround time of getting certain tasks done. So I question that 3.25 based on what I just said.
I guess there's a number of ways to look at this. The 3.25 addition, I just want to make it clear that includes that actually is all of the ads that we would need to complete the project at Davisville Academy. Mm-hmm. Everything else is a wash. And even with those ads, there's no increase in dollars. There's a zero sum at the bottom of this page. Not all FTEs are exactly the same. Some of them are FTEs of teaching assistants, some are clerks, some are teachers. You see what I mean? So there's no money added for staffing in my proposal. There is 3.25 staff, and those are 3.25 that I have let the committee know about right up front when I talked about, the ultimate staffing proposal for Davisville when I gave you that spreadsheet last year. Right. In fact, it's a little bit under that proposal because at the time, my thinking was to include an administrator for that, and we have not. So, I've looked at the day-to-day supervision of that in another way that comes into some savings here. So I just want to be clear about that point.
And that's great that you were able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that based on those other numbers, I think you might be able to scratch together where that, so just being a wash, it could be a negative.
At the high school, over the past several years, we have reduced the number of clerks. I think we were at 10 at one point. We're at 7.5. And part of this proposal, in the way I'm looking to use the assistant principal at the high school, and I'm looking to reduce in terms of a TA at the high school by 0.5, and to utilize the assistant principal's clerk more for those kinds of clerical duties that this TA was handling around setting up of IEP meetings and things like that. So, and also the clerks have had to take on more responsibility in terms of ASOP, and that is the kind of confirmation of the attendance of the adults in the building. And that is something that they weren't handling before. We had to change some gears when we did some changes in our central office in the last few years. So I feel like our clerks are doing more, even though your point is well taken, fewer kids. We have sort of cut back at the high school. We have added at 2 elementary schools where you have noted that we actually had an increase in enrollment at the elementary schools. And right now we have 1.5 clerks at 3 of our elementary schools, but 1 at the others, and they could desperately need another 0.5 each. So I'm trying to do this as inexpensively as I possibly can to make sure the right clerk assistance is in the right place, and ultimately coming out of this with a zero sum. So, where we go from here, I'm open to a lot of possibilities, but I'm just trying to explain to you, what kind of went into my proposal.
And help me out, where can I see, I'm sure it's here. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just asking for kind of a tab color or a page. Where can I look at the school, the individual school, and see the clericals that are assigned to each school? I'm sure there is, right?
No, not by school yet. I need to complete that in the first tab, Mr. Biscardin, in the introduction.
Okay.
That we're going to add those FTEs, but there is 1.5 clerks at 3 of the elementaries, 1 at the other 2. There are 2 at each middle school, and then 7.5 at the high school. And then there are clerks and admin and whatnot. But that's not in here yet, Mr. Biscardin. It will be in here. But I have not broken out the FTEs by
School.
Yeah, and actually, honestly, I don't think that we actually even have on these worksheets that Mr. Jones provided clerks. It was more administrators, instructional teachers, but I can add that line item by school.
The only reason I'm asking is because, again, based on what I saw in here, that I created my own little shorthand. I don't even know what the hell what shorthand, my shorthand means. Hamilton Elementary School shows a reduction of 42 kids, and Fishing Cove an increase of 28. I'm just curious as to where we are with those 2 particular schools. Forest Park was at -5, Gwyd's -11, and Stony Lane's -9. But the 2 bigger ones that stand out was that Hamilton was off 42, and Fishing Cove was up 28. I'm just curious about those 2. So whenever we're
Curious in what respect?
Where we are.
Why those numbers fluctuate?
Well, not so much just where we are with clerks on those 2 schools.
Hamilton has 1.5. Hamilton is one of the highest enrolled schools. The lowest enrolled are Fishing Cove and Forest Park. That's why we haven't gone there yet with them.
With the reduction of 42 kids, I would think there'd be some sort of flexibility there.
But, they both have some unique features to them about why they would need clerks. Fishing Cove, for instance, has a number of different programs, including the preschool. There's a lot going on at Fishing Cove for a school that doesn't have as high an enrollment as some of the other schools. So it's an area that has a bustling front office, lots of midday pickups with the preschool and the kindergartens that are there. And at Forest Park, you have the Next Steps program. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes with the high number of IEP meetings associated with that program. So those are areas that I'd like to support with some clerk services. I mean, I agree with the point that Mr. Cerisi said. I don't necessarily see these as having to be the full summer, but during the school year, definitely items that we need. Next Steps, by the way, is the special education program that is only at Forest Park. It's not at the other elementary schools. And it's not a behavioral program per se, but it's a special program with more than one room, a number of kids with significant special needs that the other elementary schools do not have.
And just as a side, Mary, just nice job on the book.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Mudge.
Dr. O'Jay, I didn't ask at the last meeting. You might have said this, but I hadn't been on the computer that much. That up to speed as well. But I'd asked for some information regarding one-time occurrences that we had in our budget last year that we don't have again. Like we had an expenditure for I think a study. I think we had the septic system at the high school. It cost us $25,000. We had the tennis courts and that type of stuff. So there's a number of one-time expenditures, and I'd like to know, those are itinerant, I guess. They pop up here and there, and I don't mean it's a one-time expenditure for a specific a television or something like that at this point in time, although I'm concerned about that. So what I'm trying to do is find out how much money we're freeing up from those one-time expenditures that aren't normal recurring expenditures like, pumping out the septic system or, changing the light bulbs. I mean, those are recurring, so, and assuming they go on. I'm looking to find out what we have that we won't be, doing next year. So I didn't see it in here. Now, I'd still like to get that. Now, along with that, I'm looking at some numbers here, and a few of these numbers kind of stand out to me because there has been some significant increases in, for example, if I can find it, material. Okay, your supplies went up significantly by some paperwork. I can't find anything. Here someplace. Supplies went up with $124,000. Oh, here it is. We had general supplies went up here from item 561 from our revised budget of 14. Okay, we had an increase in general supplies, code 561, of $187,000 this year, an increase or a 48% increase in supplies. I'd like to get some information on that. We don't have to do that tonight.
I can have Mrs. King address that for you right now.
Yeah.
Before I do that, I'd just like to say, as you recall, supplies is one of those items that it doesn't really have a very specific name, and it always sounds like something that you can easily do without. And I think that's part of the rationale that we've had in the last few years for significantly cutting back on supplies. And this is a request, part of the proposal, to try to get back in line. We've done some studying of similar districts to us on the per pupil for supply lines. We're really struggling in making ends meet in terms of providing our schools with the supplies that we need with the cuts that we've done in recent years. So I'll let Mrs. King talk a little bit about some of those details.
In that line item, the 56101, it's general supplies, it's also library supplies and reading supplies. So it's all supplies for the district. It's not just general supplies. And I can send you the worksheet. I took a look at our surrounding districts and what their totals were in FY12. And the average per pupil on supplies in that line item was $110 per pupil. And we were spending $90. So the reason why this 524 budgeted does not equate to $110 per pupil is because there's more than just like in past years, there's more than just the general supplies. The $110 per pupil was on general supplies that I found. The principals in the past 2 years have indicated that they feel as though the GEMSNet science kits, which do come out of this supply line, that's where we're supposed to charge this, has significantly drained their numbers. They don't feel like that when those numbers are allocated from the curriculum department, Dr. Humbird, her department keeps track of all of what everybody needs for those science supplies, and then it gets allocated to the schools. They feel as though those are big drains. Some of the schools are $7,000, $8,000, and those supplies are not getting covered. And I think that with the decline in the cut in supplies in all these years, it's really, really showing up in these last 2 years that they're having a difficult time getting through the year for the stuff that they need. I can assure you that these principals are very, very frugal with their supplies. We purchase our supplies primarily from W.B. Mason. That's where the state contract is. But there are many times where they'll come to me and say, I can find it somewhere cheaper. And I'll say, you know what, knock yourself out. If you can get it somewhere cheaper, get it somewhere cheaper. So that was the thinking behind increasing the supplies. They're really in need of that.
Well, I guess I'm kind of concerned about what the terminology general supplies means, because you're kind of wondering if that, in fact, doesn't include supplies for maintenance and
no, it does not. We don't pay for any maintenance supplies. All the custodial or maintenance for our people, it does not include like light bulbs or anything like that. And if you mean custodial, no, there's no custodial supplies. We don't pay for custodial supplies. The maintenance, there is a materials line item in here or a maintenance supply line item in here, but that's not where the big increases are. The big increases are for the schools, general supplies, for copy paper, for pencils, for, paper, for the needs of the classroom.
Okay. Going to a couple other ones. You have an increase for utilities this year. You're anticipating a 10% increase also. Okay. And that's about $22,000, a 13%. Here's an interesting one. You're anticipating an increase in rentals, okay, of about $23,000. So in the rental, and if I haven't filed up my, I'll make that statement, if I haven't filed up my database here. But it looks like rentals, you got $196,000, and it's probably a mistake on my part because I can't see that. That being that high.
I can definitely look into that. On the utilities, I will tell you that there is projections in here for Davisville Elementary School, so that's going to increase your utilities, especially electricity and whatnot. So you have numbers in here from that, so that's why there's an increase. Normally, that should probably remain at least relatively flat because we do have the purchasing contracts, but we do need to consider increased use of Davisville Elementary next year if that's what we're planning.
Okay, I notice also that under student transportation services, that appears to be an 8% increase also over last year.
Well, about 2.3% of that is based on contract, and then again, there's Davisville Elementary estimates in there as well.
Okay, so that's going to come. That's good, because that's the follow-up question I had. In respect to some of these questions, I think Mr. John Prescott mentioned a couple of things. I can be wrong, obviously, but when I look at the charts I put together, so I can never keep track of them, I find that, and we need to do a lot in terms of this. We need a lot more data, a better business plan, and a more detailed expenditure plan for Davisville Middle School, Davisville L. And we need to do that also in terms of the reductions and cuts and so forth and so on. But with the assumption that we've made somewhere close to $380,000 of cuts at not the high school, of $380,000 of cuts, with the preponderance of that, probably $300,000 anyway, or $250,000 at the high school. Those basically, those cuts went back in to support additional district-wide initiative ads. And when I look at this, I see that, in fact, with these cuts at the high school, we've used that money, okay, to add some additional students, like in robotics and the French, the preschool coordinator and so forth. But also, we've used some of that money to fund the Davisville, Academy. And I'm looking at it, I'm trying to get my hands on that whole thing, because when I look at, for example, the alternative school program, which I assume is part of that, our budget is going up 28% this year, or $255,000. When I look at the non-public school support, which encompasses the other district students, that budget is going up $144,000. And when I look at charter schools, that's going up at $306,000. Okay, so we're talking in the neighborhood of, $700,000 with those three line items. And that, to me, is you say in your opening statements, we have a lot of issues here, but those are significant drivers. And obviously, the charter school is probably the major driver for our expenditure in our budget this year. And we would probably have a different conversation on that. But that's huge. And by the way, that's money we lose. That's efficiency we lose, because taking kids out, one from this class and one from that class and one from this class, is a loss of revenue. Because if they come back, it's for the price of pencils and papers. It's profit, practically. Talk about profit. So I'm extremely concerned about that, and I feel we will have a discussion on that. But we need to take some action to get our legislators to submit some legislation to get the awareness in the House and the General Assembly that our districts that are high-achieving districts and have been consistently high-achieving districts should not have to be mandated to provide charter school support. Okay? We can't, but we ought to be able to get some relief and exception to that rule. And there's a start there, because, we're spending $1 million a year to send kids out of school now. Okay? And that's significant.
And those are numbers from RIDE, so I don't make those up.
No,
so.
I'm not questioning your numbers. I'm just, and not only are we paying $900,000, okay, close to $1 million, $1 million to send a kid to charter school, but you can multiply the number of kids roughly by, well, say $3,000, because that's another $3,000 we're losing. We're not getting that money. So that's significant. We have a problem, okay? We have a problem, and we've got to do something to not discriminate against anybody or anything else. We're a high-achieving district, and we need to get the state's attention on this, because look what's done this year, $306,000, okay? So it looks like the preponderance of the increase in our budget this year is centered and focused on those four areas. So, again, going back to the alternative programs, the non-public private school costs are still going up, and the fact that we, in fact, have pumped in a significant amount of money into the, or will be into the Davisville Elementary School. And what I'm saying there is, okay, you've got $245,000 worth of expenditures that you provided to us for the academy, for a nurse, a clerk, and some relocation funds, and social worker and school psychologist. Well, those are being paid for out of cuts that we made essentially at the high school. So if we didn't have the Davisville Elementary, issue to face with this year, that would be savings. Okay, and I'm not convinced that I've seen enough information that says that, we should go forward with that this year. And I need a lot more information to really support that and understand that. But it certainly isn't clear to me when I look at the fundamentals and I look at the dollars and the flow of money. So again, what I was referring to was if you look at, this is kind of like the RIDE numbers, because I correlated everything back to RIDE, that would have been the Code 06, the alternative programs, have gone up, basically, if they've gone up 137% since fiscal year 10. Charter schools have gone up 200% since fiscal year 10. Okay? Educational, it's not a lot of money. The collaboratives, I guess, that's going up 271%. So we have some really, cost drivers here that we really have to look at and really be convinced we're going in the right direction. And again, there are issues that I think that we need. I know I'm talking too much here, but with respect to the DE transition plan, there's much more information needed in terms of the total, the CD, the clinical day program, the out-of-district students. It's all got to be brought together so we can see what that's going to be, including the transportation, including the financial cost of operating the facility, which is I believe, about $70,000 short. The administrative costs, material equipment, telecom, all that stuff has to be identified in a document so we can really analyze what the cost is and ask for the support of the council.
All right, so Mr. Mudge brings up a good question in that Dr. Roger, when I asked him about when he was going to do a presentation on the Davisville Academy, he said well, he could do it at our next meeting, although, remember, we meet next week to talk about the budget, and then we have the 25th of February that we meet again to talk about budget, and that is our drop-dead time that we need to finalize the budget to send over to the town council. So my question to the committee would be, when do you want a presentation on the Davisville Academy? Is that something you want before you finalize the budget? Is it something you want after you finalize the budget? Because it just impacts the amount of time you have to talk about the document in front of you. So that would be my question. Mr. Buscard, and I see Mr. Mudge.
I don't see a reason why we need to see it before the budget.
It's a driver, though, John. I think that's the problem.
Well, yeah, but we kind of already, we've already committed to it. It's not like we can change our mind here.
Well, you can always delay it a year, but it's a matter of just putting the data. John, all I like to do is see all the data. Because right now, if we look at Dr. O'Shea's initial plan, we're basically going to lose, $500,000 this year with the bond cost, if you figure that in there, or some of that, okay? And that includes the construction, okay, the construction bond. So, and then we're apparently on for the following year to save $1 million or make $1 million. So I just need more information.
Yeah. I've heard that from you and from a few other members of the committee. I'm happy with doing something brief next week to, and maybe sending you some preliminary information even before then. I think, for instance, your analogy just now of looking at, taking from the high school to give to the Davisville program, obviously things are just not that simple. There's the Davisville program, some of the ads are taken from programming that we already spend on an outsourced basis for the social work services, and some of that is reoriented towards some of the staff. So, and as you know, the whole point, and you brought this up, that the price of the alternative schooling services that we pay out of district for is going up so astronomically. That's the whole point of having the Davisville program, and that's part of the point of why it can't wait any longer. We have been spending an astronomical amount of money on out-of-district tuitions, and this staff is getting paid for by bringing those kids back from out-of-district tuitions, and in other cases where a student who would potentially go to an out-of-district placement, we don't have to worry about it as much as anymore. We can cite numerous examples already this year of students where in other years we'd be talking about spending in the neighborhood of $50,000 for an out-of-district placement. Now we know we have a program in the district that can deal with that. And it doesn't take too many of those kinds of tuitions to get to a point where you can afford a few staff members. I'll be happy next week to, as part of the budget discussion, to go into a little more detail on these things and provide you with the information that you would need. I don't think it needs to be like an all or nothing. I'd just do a presentation or we discuss budget. I could probably do like a 10-minute presentation, particularly if you can give me some information during the week about what particular questions you'd like answered. I could provide you.
Yeah, and I'll do that. And I'm behind. I wanted to get this stuff done earlier, and I told Bob I would, and I kind of fell behind. But, one particular question is if you look at your budget for your 08, that's the kids that go, are the out-of-district kids, I believe, the 08 kids. Our budget's going up $144,000. I would have thought that it would have gone down this year. So I think but that's the information I'm looking for. Maybe I just don't understand it, but when I look at the numbers here, that I think you got to package this whole thing to get a better handle on this thing.
I understand.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question too? is the Excel spreadsheet that we have provided. It was back in April of 2015 that we provided to everybody, and I think you're looking at it right now, Mr. Mudge, because it seems like you're looking at capital, and you're looking at operating, and you're looking at
This is the budget you just
projection.
provided.
Right.
This is the one you just provided.
Is that helpful to you, though? Is that how you want to see it, or are you going to let us know that there's other stuff?
Well, you're speaking of like this.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that, but I'm going to send you some data that I put together that draws me to make some conclusions. I'll be glad to send that.
Okay.
And I don't make up the data. I probably make a lot of mistakes inputting stuff because it's difficult sometimes. But I'll be glad to share it with you and list these things. I haven't had an opportunity to do that. But I'll get this together. I provided something to the Budget Committee, but we didn't have a chance to talk about that. But absolutely. Oh, by the way, with respect to that, I have an issue with us being invited to a meeting with the auditor. I'd like to insist that we participate in the auditor's findings whenever he gets his job done. From what I understand, the audit isn't completed, which means...
It is not.
Which means when we can't get the UCOA data right, or unless, I hope, as I understand it, it's the problem that has caused the budget from being approved and we have to do a re-audit has nothing to do with the school side of the house. It's with the town side of the house. So I assume the information we provided to RIDE is still accurate.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so from that's what I'm saying. Is so all the data you've given us, it's pretty reliable. I mean,
For the FY13,
the numbers
absolutely.
are good. The numbers are good.
Absolutely, for FY13.
I wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
And I assumed that was the case. However, I would like to say, okay, with respect to that, I'd like to sit down with the auditors when this is done. And two, I believe, and I haven't heard us speak about that by February 1st, which just passed, we're obligated to provide a document to RIDE, and I think the school committee has to certify that we have enough funding to get us through the fiscal year. So it's a mid-year, synopsis, and I think that's also required by statute. So I would like to know if we've done that, and if we do, that would give us a real clear snapshot of where we're at now and what the potential of an overrun or an underrun will be in the next 6 months and what we have to cut or adjust.
Well, I don't know what report you're talking about, so I can tell you unequivocally that report has not gone to RIDE. So I don't know what that is.
I'll send you some.
In the projections that I've seen that I have done, we are going to be tight for this year. I had indicated that when we passed the teacher's contract because that increase was not budgeted. That was pulled out of the budget at the end last year. So we are going to be tight. I've pulled back on spending for IT facilities and the curriculum department because I want to make sure that we're going to be able to make it.
That's fine, but along those lines, if we have to make up a couple $100,000 and so forth, I would like the committee to be part of that. And I don't mean that you're making the decision, because I think it's up to the school committee to make that decision, and they're responsible for the cuts. Administration's not responsible, okay, for the cuts. We should participate in that. Too often in the past, well in the past, we've had to cut maintenance, or we've had to cut X or cut Y. Well, we should be part of that process. It shouldn't rest on your shoulders alone, okay? And I don't expect it to rest on your shoulders.
Mr. Buskard, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I'd like to make a comment, but it seems like it was so long ago.
You forgot.
No, I would just like to kind of dovetail off of what Dr. Auger was saying, that, Bill, to what you had said, I hope you were just saying that in passing, that to delay Davisville Academy by a year, because by delaying that by any length of time is going to delay any savings or revenue we could receive from it. So not only are you trying to so the money you would save by delaying it the net better be a heck of a lot more than what we would gain by having that going off.
John,
the
I
schedule.
agree with you. This isn't just a numbers game. I just want to know what that number we're saying is now and make sure I understand it. That's all.
All right, so it seems like our committee has come to a point where we're, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. James.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. So a couple points, a couple questions, and then a couple longer, or at least more detailed issues. So I would like to start with the point you made about the budget process and the short term having to approve this by February. I've made this point in the past. We're one of the earliest school districts by our town charter to have to submit. I hope, since this is an election year, the town council is getting the charter review ready, and we relook at the budgetary timelines for the town, moving us to be in accordance with the majority of other cities and towns in the state would give us about 3 extra weeks to work this process. And I don't see any delay in potentially changing the charter. I actually see more efficiencies to be gained because the March census comes in and some other things. So I hope the town council gets the Charter Review Commission going, and that's a subject they take up. I concur with Mr. Cerisi's point about the clerks. I think that's a good observation. A couple questions, Mary, just in the detail line. There's an item for, I think it says private school, no location. I don't know if that's a wedge or something, but it's like $22,000. It's 08902.
I'll look at that.
And then, I think I've asked this, I keep getting confused, but 08404 West Bay Christian Academy?
You know, Bob, Mr. Jones, I did just see that, and I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's...
Because it should be West Bay Collaborative. We don't do West Bay Christian Academy.
Well, there's a West Bay Collaborative later on under Object Code 11803.
Unless we have special education services that need to be provided there, and that's possible. So
Yeah,
I'll get
but
back
I
to you
guess
on
I'd
that.
ask why that location, as opposed, you know. So I
could
don't have to
Zillow.
answer that now. I mean, I'll just,
Okay.
only
I'll get
because
back to you on that.
there's a 150% increase to that one location. So, I mean, I just sort of, you know, is that something that our clinical day program or something could do? One of the things, so that's just a couple quick questions
Yep,
to
I'll look
follow
at
up on. A couple just sort of editorial points. There's an item in the budget Dr. O'Shea is proposing about the long-term infrastructure study. I don't know if 50,000, but I would, you know, recommend, again, I'll advocate for it with the community and in public. You don't need to answer that now, Patty. I mean, I wasn't looking.
Well, she's here, so.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So, but it's,
Special
I get-
education services.
okay, even though it's a private school?
Because that's additional to what a private school would
Yeah,
provide.
I remember that.
Okay.
Special education.
Okay.
Right. I don't agree with it.
Yeah,
either.
even, wow,
Yeah, but
okay, that's very
the-
interesting.
That's the right thing. I remember when that was implemented, and I don't agree with it either, but that's the right thing. So-
Okay, thank you. I would make the point, I didn't get to make this point at the last meeting. You know, right now, the average age of our buildings in the high school skews this is running close to 50 years. Based on the NESDEC projections, if we don't do anything, we'll have 70% of our students in buildings that will have an average age of 58, give or take, 0.8 years. by 2020. So, I mean, we can look at already what's in the capital improvement plan for stuff we project will be fixed. I suspect the Wickford Middle School pipe leak, you know, those buildings that are 80-plus years old, that are 60 years old, it's hard to have a vision for a town that we're pushing on the one hand about economic development and doing a lot of stuff and have buildings that are 60 years old. And that's just money we're going to put in. We need to understand if there's a better way we can organize our infrastructure to better serve our students, to be cost efficient, and to make North Kingstown, as part of an entire economic package, a place that, you know, folks want to come to live and do business. And so I wholly recommend that the town council partners with us on this. Again, I don't know if it's 50,000, but whatever the appropriate amount is, that we do that, and we do that in this calendar year. I agree also, Mr. Tracy made the point about, you know, sort of, you know, where the money is. And so I just gave this to Dr. Auger today, so again, not looking for any answers. But, you know, we put a big microscope on the high school. I think there's some appropriate attention that could be paid to the middle school as well. And so Dr. Auger sort of has some things I asked for, and maybe if he could work that over the next week and come back with his thoughts on those.
I'd be happy to.
You know, one thing I would like the committee to do before we submit the final budget, you know, we have technology sort of buried in here in different places. I think it's appropriate we pull the long-term recurring technology needs out of this and submit it, however the right format is, in a different identification way. So however we decide to work it this year, but we start identifying the appropriate annual amounts that need to be put in, whether we're going to spend it all that year or not, because it might be a cyclical thing. But pull them out and identify them so, again, they don't compete with, well, first of all, our town charter says capital is supposed to be $20,000 or above the project. So, you know, the $10,000 software thing here really shouldn't be in there anyways. But, you know, the servers, the computers, the laptops, whatever we eventually move to, we know that that investment's going to require periodic refreshment, just like our houses do, just like our buildings do. And, you know, we shouldn't be competing those against the other capital needs of the district. We should be identifying them separately and making the case for them separately and working with the town council on that point. The pre-K program, the budget subcommittee, and I thank Dr. Auger and Mary and Dr. Pizzullo provided a lot more detail on. I don't know if it'd be a surprise to people in this district that pre-K is per pupil more expensive, or as expensive as any other, probably more expensive than other students in this district. One thing I would ask, you know, Dr. Auger go back and look at is, you know, we have the issue, and one of the cost drivers that he talked about and Dr. Pizzullo talked about was moving from 4 to 5 day and the mandates. You know, we're not the only district facing that. So, you know, could we look at other districts, see what they're doing? East Greenwich is 4 day. I assume they're moving to 5 days to solve that issue. You know, there are other options, other locations in Fishing Cove, just to, you know, explore different things, because this is an area that's important, but it's an area that's consuming a lot of resources on a per pupil thing. So, you know, again, just options for us to consider. The last thing I'm going to bring up, I want to follow on Mr. Mudge's point. If you look at, you know, we talk about people as a cost driver. If we look at what Mr. Mudge alluded to, you know, in the last 2 years, our tuition to charter schools has increased by $403,000. That's in 2 years. And clearly, this year, we did not budget for that much of an increase. So we went through, or I think the committee's gone through a nut roll in the past of how we pay for that in August when we find out. Mr. Mudge has already brought up some of the points about why those offsets are hard to do. I just want to bring up a couple points. You know, if you look at the law and what the General Assembly did when this whole concept came in, it was about really being innovative and serving students who need that experience. If you look at the state average for all charter schools, this is from RIDE, 8,800 students, 71% of them qualify for free and reduced lunch. The state average for all districts is 46%. So clearly, the average charter school is serving a population that statistically we know needs some extra or needs the focused educational assistance to bring them to the level we think they deserve, to prepare them to be for future careers, for college readiness, and for citizenship. We have 2 charter schools that consume 90% of our resources, the Compass School and Kingston Hill. Kingston Hill's free and reduced lunch population is 12%. In 2011-12, it was at 16%. North Kingstown comprised 14% of their applications. 2 years later, North Kingstown is 40% of their applications. The number of applicants in that school has doubled. Their enrollment hasn't changed, so they now have twice the amount of population to draw from, yet their free and reduced population's gone down by 20%. The biggest driver gainer for their application pool is North Kingstown. It's gone up by 70 students. Yet North Kingstown only comprises less than 7% free and reduced lunch for them. So clearly the point in state law is not being accommodated with this. And statistically, you know, we talk about the random, the lottery, the selection. It somewhat confuses me how you can have twice the number of students, yet your population of who you're supposed to be serving is going down unless you're not attracting those students. And so I don't want to belabor this point except to say that 400,000 is, you know, it's
Budget buster.
18, you know, it's 5 FTEs. You know, we sit here and we press, and we're pressing Dr. Auger, you know, cut this, find this, be more efficient here. And maybe those are things that are necessary. But it really disturbs me to be sending $400,000 to schools who, to me, at least when it comes to our student population, is not within the spirit of what the law is saying. And so I would make a motion that we authorize Dr. Auger to at least engage with some of his other peers in the area, you know, South Kingston, Charahoe, however he feels appropriate, to at least engage in a fact-finding discussion with them if those districts and superintendents feel the same way, and any action that they have done to address that with those and report back to us. And concurrently, I would ask that the committee authorize the Budget Subcommittee to engage other elected officials as appropriate or as advice given by the committee to raise this issue through their channels to see if that is really within the spirit of what the General Assembly meant when it devised charter schools.
I would support that, Bob.
What I believe, I just said to Mr. Cerisi, is I don't think we have any problems in authorizing the Budget Subcommittee. But before we make a motion for the charter school on tonight's agenda, since our budget only lists, our agenda only lists budget, that is something we could put on the agenda for the 11th.
I think it relates to the budget because it's a cost driver in our budget. It's a fact-finding part of...
We're getting a little tenuous, and I don't know if a week would make a difference.
Well,
and I would, just to be on clear legal ground without our legal counsel here, I would feel more comfortable in making sure that we made it when it was appropriately put on the agenda rather than having it tenuous.
Do we get a consensus?
Well, I understand your point, and maybe that's for the latter part of my motion. I would not understand why Dr. Ojea cannot engage in conversation with his peers about budgetary issues that relate across,
I believe
issues
you're right on that. Dr. Ojea and Larry. Teresa, sorry.
Yeah, I just, I certainly don't think there's an issue, and the committee, by consensus, requesting Dr. Ojea to engage in that dialogue with his peers. We can certainly do that tonight. I think in abundance of caution, I think the other motion could wait for 6 more days, and we can do it clearly and cleanly when it's properly advertised on the agenda, and we can certainly take a vote that night, and I would support that as well. So, but I really don't think we need a motion to kind of give the committee's consensus to Dr. Ojea and get some feedback from him on how he feels about that.
I'm fine with following up on that, and I will do some work with, make some phone calls and see if I can get maybe a meeting with some of the superintendents that, pay into those charter schools that you mentioned.
I think maybe it's a direction or an action for, certainly the school committee has passed, voted to approve resolutions in the past to send to state representatives, and that might be something that we've done as an individual school committee, but maybe the Rhode Island Association of School Committees could certainly lobby state representatives and possibly the Superintendent's Association, if they so supported that as well. Their organization could lobby the state officials.
Couldn't we also, a while back, I can't remember how long ago now, but wasn't there like a type of, I don't want to call it a chain email because it really wasn't a chain email, but it was an email that started at another school district and went around to all the other school districts, and it was a resolution that we all agreed upon?
Yes, frequently in the time when the General Assembly meets, we get general resolutions that we send up to the State House. And we vote on them, we put them on our agenda, we vote on them. So if that is something that we want to later draw up a resolution and send it out to the other school committees, we can do that too.
Okay. There's a bunch of different ways we can go about getting attention.
Right. And I would say if the Budget Subcommittee is going to be taking this up, as, they're fully within their rights to do, it's the sort of thing that they can also, if they want to draw up some sort of a resolution to bring it before the rest of the school committee, we put it on our agenda, and then we can take it from there.
Okay.
Mr. Mudge.
I agree, but, in deference to Dr. Ojea, I think we've got the job, okay? He can round up some superintendents, okay? But I think the preponderance
Thank you, Bill.
is well beyond this. And it's, well, to my way of thinking, this isn't just a North Kingstown issue. This is a state issue. In the spirit of what we're supposed to be doing is helping the kids that were in, low-achieving school districts. And anyway, with respect to that, I think that this thing lies in our legislature, and I think we should take, and maybe even go with the town council and ask the council, and have a joint letter to our legislature, say, hey, we want relief, and if you don't want to do it for the state, we want an exception for North Kingstown to not say you won't, but you have an option to provide this funding.
So why don't we have that on our next agenda, and I believe that we can bring that up. We can have a fuller discussion at that time. Mr. Cerruti.
Second. You did make a motion, right?
Well, isn't there a motion on the table still?
Was there?
We asked Dr. Ojea to do that.
Right, so we're going to withdraw, or?
Oh, no.
We don't really need a motion. He can
Well,
do
the
it.
issue is if we don't feel we need a motion, then I will withdraw it.
Withdraw, okay.
The motion to adjourn.
So now there's a motion to adjourn in a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.